Hello, good morning. I'm going to talk to you today about the Bloomsbury Group. This is for the June issue of the Artist and Leisure Painter magazine, and these are the accompanying videos that you can find in Painters Online. What can we say about the Bloomsbury Group? Actually, this video comes at a good time because I've just been to Sussex at the weekend to visit Charleston. I've been a few times before. This time they had a post-impressionist exhibition that I wanted to go and see, which was very interesting and included the catalogue for the 1910 first post-impressionist exhibition mounted by Roger Fry and Duncan Grant. So it was very interesting to see that and the list of all the artists included. And that really was a turning point in bringing these post-impressionists to the UK from all over Europe. Many artists which we will easily recognise, Cézanne, Seurat, a huge catalogue of really wonderful painters, Van Gogh, artists that had not been seen on these shores before. It caused quite a bit of outrage at the time. It was called Manet and the Post-Impressionists, and they led with Manet. They led the exhibition with Manet. So as you came in, it sort of started off quite low-key. Manet was considered not as progressive as some of the others, and had beautiful paintings of women in top hats on horseback. But as you went through the exhibition, it became progressively more brave. There were bathers, nude bathers, and other nudes and all sorts of other paintings that caused a bit of a stir amongst the British at that time, who were in a sort of just a pre-war greyness about the UK. So yeah, it was pretty revolutionary. And of course, the Bloomsbury Group were very much central to that movement and fed off greatly from the Post-Impressionists, particularly in their colour palette. And I wanted to talk to you today about some of the portraits at Charleston, and then we'll talk briefly at the end about the colour palettes that they used. So there's a lot to cover. And in the article for the Artist magazine, which will be out probably mid-May, and you can buy a copy in WH Smith's, I focus on a portrait of this girl here called Henrietta Bell. Obviously, we all know quite a bit about the Bloomsbury Group, potentially. And I just wanted to focus in on a portrait that you might not have seen before, and a character that you might not know anything about. You'll know that the Bloomsbury Group lived in squares and loved in triangles. They had quite a complicated extended family, let's say, who met and came together in Bloomsbury in central London, and then moved out to a farmhouse in West Sussex in Firle called Charleston. Vanessa Bell and her estranged husband Clive Bell, Vanessa Bells' colleague, friend, partner Duncan Grant. They lived together for their whole lives at Charleston. Duncan Grant's lovers came to Charleston, and Vanessa and Duncan Grant had a child together called Angelica. And Angelica went on to marry one of Duncan Grant's partners, Bunny Garnett, David Garnett, and together they had 2 daughters, and one of them was Henrietta. So this is Henrietta Garnett. This is a painting called Henrietta, painted in 1955 by Vanessa Bell, 67.5 centimetres by 52.5 centimetres. It's an oil on canvas. This is actually part of the Royal West of England collection. And I've written about this piece for the Royal West of England Academy magazine also. It's a beautiful painting, and it deploys quite a lot of the post-impressionist colour palette. So really, Vanessa Bell, well, I'll tell you, she says, just reading from my notes here, there was a great deal of excitement about colour. That was Vanessa Bell's defining memory of an intense period of artistic development in the 1900s. She really was turning grey old Britain on its head and putting colour into everything. She actually sort of eliminated representational colour, and she experimented with abstracts a great deal. We'll know from Matisse's work his use of unrepresentational colour in Woman in a Hat. She has a very green face and unusual colours, but it's still quite harmonious and easy to read. This is still quite a representational painting, but you'll see in other works of Vanessa Bells that she's really experimenting with colour. You can see here that she probably would have used a chrome yellow, which was considered to be the colour of transgression. It was outrageously modern. And of course, Van Gogh had used it in his sunflower paintings and wheat field paintings. It was a relatively new colour. Got a chrome yellow hue here. And this is a Winsor & Newton colour. Taken off the shelves at Pegasus Art Shop, who've kindly allowed us to use their shop to film these little features. Brilliant art shop in the Cotswolds, supplying some of the best brands and a whole range of really high quality art materials. So yes, Vanessa Bell was really influenced by Van Gogh and his colour palette, and would have used, as I say, chrome yellow, which had only been introduced in the 19th century. Well, let's read about it here. I'm using this book, A Secret Lives of Colour by Cassia St. Clair, which is the most brilliant book. Highly recommend it. And it looks at all the different colours, a selection of colours. And she's talking here about chrome yellow. So let's just have a little look at that. So the baking late summer of 1888 was the happiest of Van Gogh's life. He was at the Yellow House in Arles. He just started painting using chrome yellow. So while the avant-garde artists of the day had access to wonderfully saturated reds and blues, they were lacking the third primary colour, yellow. Chrome yellow arrived none too soon, and it owed its genesis of discovery in 1762 to a French chemist called Nicolas Louis Vauquelin, and it was discovered through a metal named chrome or chromium, and came onto the artist market in the late 1800s. So by 1910, if we imagine that Vanessa Bell, well, she was born in 1879 and died in 1961. She painted this painting in 1955. So she would have been, so quite old when she painted this work. she had less than 10 years to live when she painted this work of her granddaughter. But she would have been introduced to chrome yellow in the early 1900s. And used it liberally in her work. Other 19th century post-impressionist palette colours were cobalt blue, viridian, lovely vert colour, and cadmium. All the cadmium yellow was introduced. So those three colours were introduced in quick succession in the 19th century as well. So yeah, lots of new colours coming onto the market, and they were used very much by the Bloomsbury Group. So shall I tell you a little bit more about Henrietta and her bee-stung lips and symmetrical features? She's right on the cusp of womanhood here. Her innocent gaze and prim yellow dress hide the many complications of her unconventional family upbringing, with the added pathos of knowing the somewhat tragic life that followed. Shockingly, within 7 years of this painting, Henrietta would be a teenage widow with a tiny baby to care for. The life of Vanessa Bell and her sister Virginia Woolf is well documented in their novels, artworks, biographies and films at their family home in Charleston, but less is known about the generations that followed and those that were brought up in the shadows of these trailblazers and found it hard to carve out their own identity. Henrietta was born in 1945, one of the two daughters of Angelica and David Garnett, as I say, the former lover of Duncan Grant. She was brought up at Hilton Hall, a cold Jacobean house, and Henrietta spent many holidays at the colourful Charleston, where she sat for portraits. By this time, Vanessa had moved from her studio downstairs to a studio in the attic studio. And this is a portrait of Vanessa Bell painting in her attic studio, painted by Duncan Grant. Oh, my apologies. This is, I don't think that is her painting in her studio. In fact, sorry, I've got here painting at La Suco. So this is on a holiday with Duncan Grant. And actually you can see this in Charleston. It was smaller than I thought. It's 46 centimetres by 36 in oil on canvas, and shows an older Vanessa Bell. So this is the kind of age she would have been painting that portrait of Henrietta. Duncan Grant and Vanessa painted multiple portraits of each other. And it gives us a really good document of them as they grow and develop and grow up, of each other's painting style, how they influenced each other's styles. So it's just a really interesting sort of catalogue of work. Bell, as I say, experimented with complete abstraction in the early 1900s, 1914, but continued to paint the figure and many portraits. As I say, that's the wonderful thing about charting all of their lives, is that we have all these portraits that help us to understand them. Vanessa Bell drew a lot of inspiration from domestic life, family members, and that particularly suited her as she entered old age living in Charleston. Henrietta was the apple of her grandmother's eye, and has been described being painted by Bell with incredible detail. Henrietta says that she would first mix the colours on the palette, glancing first at me and then at the portrait, gently stabbing at the canvas. The glances she sent across the room were extraordinarily intimate and reassuring. She often had an observant nod and an amused smile. It's lovely, isn't it? Such sort of personal anecdotes. This is another painting that you can see at Charleston. It's actually in a beautiful gilt frame and hangs in one of the lower sitting rooms. with a beautiful view out onto their garden. And that is Henrietta Garnet again painted in the same year as the other portrait, 1955, by Vanessa Bell, 54.5 centimetres by 39 centimetres. And that is very representational and shows Henrietta just as she is. But it's not a formal portrait. It's kind of quite loose and sketchy, using those beautiful earth tones. Very accomplished portraits. The composition of this painting is simple and the colours are bold. Even though she is flattened in this painting on the pictorial space, there's definitely a feeling of movement, as if she might stand up and walk away at any moment. One can certainly see the influence of the post-impressionists here, such as Cézanne or Gauguin, in her colour choices and her expressive brushstroke. The post-impressionists, as we know, were experimenting with colour. They were experimenting with impasto. They were going one step further than the Impressionists by being non-representational. They were being braver, and they were carving the path for the Fauvists, who came later and took it one step further again. Vanessa Bell had visited Picasso's studio and spent some time in Paris. She was present at the groundbreaking show, as I say, by Roger Fry in 1910, and it influenced her work every day beyond. In a cold post-war Britain in 1916, it was a unique time and a great time to explore a bold colour palette. Some say that her love of colour was a reaction to an early encounter with John Singer Sargent, who taught her at the Royal Academy and didn't agree with her overuse of grey, a phrase that stuck with her. But indeed, she used a great deal of colour throughout her career. She took this advice literally and consequently took great inspiration from Matisse, particularly Picasso. Even her gardens were planted with clashing borders. If you go to Charleston, you'll see all the many colourful, highly decorative nudes painted onto walls, wallpaper, tables, ceramics, really everywhere. Even though on visiting again this time, even though it's so highly decorative, it's very harmonious. It's not clashing, it's not jarring, it's actually quite calm. And this is the bohemian world of Charleston that Henrietta would have experienced. She says, just to finish this film, it was an extraordinary treasure chest, overflowing with familiar curiosities, beauty, ideas, people and jokes. It reeked of turpentine toast, of apples, damp walls and garden flowers. The atmosphere was one of liberty and order. I think this is both her parents. Clive Bell was an art historian and wrote some important literary critique of the time, but was potentially more organised and more conservative than her mother, although, as we know, Clive Bell was not in fact her biological father. She was brought up as a Bell, however, and didn't find out until I think it was her 17th or potentially 18th birthday that Duncan Grant was her biological father. So very interesting. So what happened to Henrietta, just briefly? So she only learned of her complicated inheritance in a memoir written by her mother, Deceived with Kindness, in 1984. That was when she learned of the true story of her heritage. At 17, she married Bruno Partridge, the son of Ralph and Frances, the sister of David Garnett's first wife, Ray Marshall, another complexity. He was 10 years her senior and family friends of her parents. A year later, their daughter Sophie was born, and in the same year that their daughter was born, Bruno suffered an aortic aneurysm and dropped dead instantaneously. The shock of his death led to a decade of debauchery and hedonism in the swinging 60s. She drifted around Cumbria and Ireland in a gypsy caravan convoy in search of peace and love. Her life took many sad twists and turns, and you can read about the rest of her life in my article in the June issue of The Artist magazine. This finally is another portrait of Vanessa Bell. It's called Portrait of a Lady. That's 1959, so a few years later, by Duncan Grant, 74.5 centimetres by 60 centimetres, and it's an oil on canvas. So that was 2 years before Vanessa Bell died, and that's her as an older woman. So just some really, hopefully some more unusual portraits that you wouldn't have seen, and gives you a picture of, a sort of wider picture of Vanessa Bell and her granddaughter Henrietta, a little picture of what Vanessa might have experienced at Charleston, and hopefully another angle on the Bloomsbury group, and what was happening a bit further down the line. It's fascinating, isn't it? What a fascinating group they were. I hope you've enjoyed this film and it inspires you to take a deeper dive into the Bloomsbury group. Go and visit Charleston, great exhibition on at the moment. Most brilliant guides in that house, with a really deep and insightful knowledge into the characters that lived there, the beautiful Sussex Downs. I can't wait to visit again and continue to learn more about this really interesting and important creative group, the Bloomsbury Group. Thank you for watching.